There are so many different ways to win in the sports card market, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through 14 different strategies that you can use to profit with cards, and then I'll share with you one of my favorite tips that I've picked up as a longtime card investor to amplify the results no matter which of these strategies you pick. So with that, let's talk about some ways to win with cards. So the first one we'll talk, John, is quick flips. So a quick flip is interesting because you actually create the profit margin when you buy. With most of these other strategies, something has to happen after you buy the card. But with a quick flip, what we're doing is we're buying at such a steep discount by being savvy, by understanding the market, by knowing what stuff is worth, by putting in the work to find these deals, that way we can create the profit margin when we buy. And as soon as we get the card in the mail, we can put it back up for sale and make the flip, turn our profit and get on to the next one. And so quick flips are interesting because there are lots of ways to find them. It's kind of just about understanding the market and knowing what to look for. So I look for a lot of bad listings, misspelled names, pictures that aren't cropped or aren't clear, like what's in the listing, listings that end at weird end times during the workday when no one's paying attention, on holidays at 2 a.m. on a Friday or something when, again, when no one is paying attention, sometimes that's when you can swoop in and find a nice deal. So quick flips is the first one. Arbitrage is number two. So arbitrage is similar to quick flips, but we're looking at basically taking advantage of the difference in prices between different markets. So if we think about eBay as the largest marketplace in the sports card world, there are other websites that do really well for some cards. So if we look at some of the auction houses that are out there, a lot of them do really well with the higher end stuff especially, but they don't have as wide of a market as eBay. And that means that you're not going to get the same kind of viewership on those sites as you will putting a card on eBay. And so sometimes you can find a deal on a card that goes a little bit lower than it maybe should, a little bit less than market price when you're looking off of eBay, and then you can move it onto eBay, get the views of the wider audience, and make a higher sale to turn a quick profit that way. The next one is buying bulk at discount. So this is similar to, you go to Costco and you buy a bunch of Twinkies in bulk, right? You buy your 36 pack of Twinkies because everyone needs 36 Twinkies in their life. But you basically are getting a deal because you're buying more all at once. So same concept in the card world. Sometimes if you're willing to pay for multiple cards at once, a seller will give you a little bit of a price break because you're providing them with liquidity or you're helping them move more inventory at once. And so that's valuable for them. And in exchange for that value, you're able to buy at a little bit bigger discount. And sometimes that's a way that you can turn the cards over for a profit. Next one is grading. Personal favorite here. It is the most repeatable, most consistent way to win with cards once you learn the skills. And so the grading process is simple. You send a card to be professionally graded. If the card gets a high enough grade, you can make money. Now we have to understand two things. One is how to evaluate condition to make sure that we're sending cards that actually have a chance to get the grades that we need that are going to add that much value. And then two, and this is the big one, is understanding what types of cards actually have big time upside. Because all too often I see newer investors sending cards off to be graded that just don't have the upside. Even if you get the grade you're looking for, you're kind of splitting hairs after all the fees and you don't leave yourself enough margin to turn a meaningful profit. And so there are cards out there where you can pay, 10, 20 bucks and all of a sudden you get a PSA 10 on this card and it sells for $200. Like those cards exist out there. And so if we're looking at how do we win with grading, I like to focus on high upside cards. And it's really about just two things. So value, knowing what kinds of cards are going to have that type of upside, and condition. Is the card in clean enough condition to have a chance at getting the grade we need? The next one is seasonal timing and playing the market swings. So when you spend some time in the card market, if you stick around long enough, you'll start to understand that there are some patterns that have repeated themselves for years and years and years. And all too often, it's this concept of as we enter the new season, values pick up. A lot of excitement entering the new season, lots of people hyping up players, the possibility of what could happen. And so values tend to rise on the way into the season. As we exit the season, yes, there's certainly going to be, guys that go crazy in the playoffs and their cards may jump. But for the bulk of players, the guys that are out of the picture, folks are out of sight, out of mind. A lot of people are moving on from this sport to the next sport. If it's the end of the baseball season, we're looking at football cards. If it's the end of the football season, we're looking at baseball cards, and basketball cards are right in the middle there too. So you've got these times of year where it's better and worse to buy and sell. And so if you can understand when those times are, you can oftentimes find really good cards of really good players just at a discount because not as many people are paying attention. And then you sell when you catch the upswing going into the following season. So that's the seasonal timing game. The next one is to speculate on player performance. This one is risky. So be careful here. But this is what a lot of people jump into right away because it's kind of obvious. You think you understand sports, you might have a beat on a player, you might have that sleeper identified, and you go out and buy that player's cards. If they go crazy on the field, they can see some rise in their card market. The key here to understand is you're not just trying to pick the players that are good, though. You're trying to pick the players that exceed the card market's expectations because there's always a level of performance baked into what people are paying for prices. For example, if Shohei Ohtani goes out and hits 40 home runs, like, yeah, it's a great season, but we're already kind of expecting that from him. And that's why people are paying such high prices for his cards to begin with. Now, if he goes out and, hits 50 home runs and steals 50 bases, that's different. He has effectively exceeded the card market's expectations, and that is why we saw card values jump when he did that. And so it's all about performance against expectations. And if you can find a player that goes out and performs above the market's expectations, you can absolutely expect to see some rise in that player's card market. The next one is a long-term holds. So when we're thinking about more of the investing game here, this is when you buy a card and you just put it away and kind of count on time to help you out here. And so what I like to focus on for longer term holds is rarity. I want to target the best cards of the best players in the highest grade I can. And what that gives me is the ability to kind of influence the price when I pull this card out to sell it in the future. I don't have to worry so much about liquidity, like the ease of selling. I can just focus on those cards that are going to be in such high demand in the future that it's going to let me kind of dictate what I sell the card for. And it's one of those where if I have something that's rare enough, then people don't have other options. And so over time, rarity really plays up in your favor as long as you're dealing in those super, super popular in-demand players. And so long-term holds are another way you can win with cards. Next one we'll talk about, this is a more active strategy, is to buy lots to piece out. So if you buy a lot of cards, and when I say a lot, I mean like we're selling 20 cards all together as a lot. So that card lot might sell for $300, but if you actually were to piece out the cards individually and sell those 20 cards as 20 separate listings, you might actually be able to get $500, $600 for that lot. You can also do this in local marketplaces. Sometimes you'll find on Facebook Marketplace, you might be able to see a old collection that someone's selling. And so there are opportunities to buy lots at discounts, and this is where you do have to put in work to piece the lots out. So this does take effort, but if you can find a lot at a steep enough discount, then you can build yourself some profit margin in. What I like to do when I'm looking at lot purchases is I want to make sure I can see an easy path to getting my money back to where everything else is just as extra, it's bonus. So I can quickly recoup my initial investment, turn at least a little bit of profit, and then the rest of it, if I sell it fast, great. If I sell it over time, great, whatever. I've already made my money and I don't have to worry about investing in a lot and taking 10 years to actually get my initial investment back before I profit. If I'm doing that, I'm kind of doing it wrong. I want to see a quick path to money here if I'm willing to put in the work. I don't want to take on a project for no reason, but breaking up lots can be a very effective way to make money in the card world. Speculating on the playoffs. So this is another one that's a little bit trickier. This takes a little bit more luck as well because we're trying to predict the future to some extent here. So if I'm speculating on the playoffs, I know I'm not going to get it right 100% of the time. No one can predict the future like that, right? So what we can do is, ask the question, who are the teams that are going to have the best chance to go deep into the playoffs? And so when you think about the playoffs, guys are on a national stage for the first time or for, way more than they normally are. A recent example of this, Tyrese Halliburton in the 2025 NBA playoffs makes this crazy run. He's making all these clutch game-winning shots, and he takes the Pacers all the way to the NBA Finals. And so here's the thing that's interesting. He had been doing that all year long. This is who he is as a player. It's just that no one watches the Indiana Pacers regularly if you don't live in the state of Indiana. So you finally have this spotlight and this national media attention on this player that's just doing what he's been doing all year anyway. And that is enough to bring new eyeballs and new attention to his card market. And that can push some values a lot higher quickly because of that added, exposure to the public there. The next one is speculating on national events or kind of getting the national spotlight. And so I'm thinking about this similarly to the playoffs, but instead of playoffs, we're focused on special events. So the home run derby, the slam dunk contest, what are those things that are going to put people into the spotlight a little bit more than normal, where they may have a chance to wow somebody and to, get someone excited about jumping in on their card market. Personal favorite example of this is actually a non-sports example, but Joey Chestnut, the hot dog eating monster, like that dude, every single 4th of July, he's the talk of the town for one day, and that's it. Like it's that day, and he goes out and destroys 1,000 hot dogs in 10 minutes or whatever it is, and then everyone moves on from there. But for one day, for that short period of time, he is so relevant, and you can actually go and find some of his cards. And I've done this multiple years now, where you pick up a card December when no one's thinking about that dude, and then on the way into the 4th of July weekend, or on the 4th of July itself, I've been able to sell these cards for a profit. He's got like a Topps Allen and Ginter card as one example. So it's kind of funny when you think about like the hot dog eating guy. You can make money on that. It's happened before. It'll probably happen again. Attention is a big deal in this market, if you are picking up what we're putting down here. The next one, speculating on free agency. So every year there's a group of free agents to be at the end of the season. And so this has sort of two different pieces to it. So the first is to, understand that these guys are oftentimes they're playing for money. So like if motivation was ever a factor, this would be the time to bet on these guys, just because the better the season they have, the more they're going to get paid. It's a pretty direct correlation. But the more important thing here is when you can look at the top names in the free agent chart and especially find some of the players that maybe aren't in as good of markets, well, guess who spends the most money? The big market team. So if we're talking baseball, it's the Yankees, it's the Mets, it's the Dodgers, those teams that have the giant market following. Those are the teams that are spending the most money in free agency. And so it's not always going to work out this way. Not everyone is going to go to one of those three teams, but if your player plays for the Marlins or the A's or something like, and they end up getting picked up in free agency by the Yankees, what do you think is going to happen to their cards? Like there's suddenly so much more attention on this player. And once again, attention is such a valuable asset in the card market. It's going to push their cards into the forefront of everyone's minds. And that can oftentimes lead to a jump in values. The next one, speculating on a trade to a better market. So very similar to the free agent play, except the thing here is we don't have as much certainty. So it's almost, you could like kind of combine these two, because if you look at the free agents to be, sometimes you can just look at, all right, what about the trade deadline? This player might be getting moved before the end of the season so that the team that has him now can get some kind of value instead of just losing him in free agency. And so you might look at this and say, all right, this guy's playing for the A's. The A's are out of the playoff picture. Who's in the contention right now that might actually trade for him as a rental? Sometimes that can help boost values as well. The next one is buying before a return from injury. So when you look at players that are very good already, that are in demand, but then they get hurt and they're out of sight, they're out of mind, they're off the radar for most people, when they start to get close to a return, all of a sudden it's like, oh, hold on, he's coming back. He's about to make his reentrance from a long absence. And, people are quickly reminded like, oh man, this dude is awesome. He's really good. Like I forgot how good he was and how much fun he was to watch. And sometimes you don't even have to wait for the return itself. Sometimes it's just the wave of attention that comes before the actual return that can be enough to boost values. The next one here, and so this is actually the last one on the list for today, but number 14 is prospecting. So what I'm looking for when I'm prospecting is players who have big time upward potential. Like we want people to see that this player can be better in the future than what they are today. And oftentimes what they're doing right now is the best indication of what they might be capable of in the future. And so age is a big deal here. If there's someone that's 25 years old making their debut, that's different than someone who's 20 years old making their debut. The 20-year-old is going to be more appealing because there's this perception that they have more time to figure it out. There's also the possibility, especially in baseball, where we have cards so early before guys ever even step onto the major league fields. You have this opportunity as they start to rise through the ranks in the minor leagues, you can actually flip before they get to the major leagues. And so sometimes it just takes a hot streak or, the news of a promotion or, a story drops about them or they start getting on people's dynasty fantasy rankings, and there's all kinds of different reasons why values would rise. What I like about prospecting, while it's not the fastest strategy usually, there is so much time for a guy to have a short-term run that pushes values higher. So it's not necessarily something that you're going to buy a prospect today and flip them next week for a profit. Certainly you can, but a lot of times it's a little bit of a longer play, but there are just lots of different opportunities, lots of reasons for a guy's cards to rise. So as we're starting to think about this is the full list of, at least 14 of the strategies. There are more, but these are some of the more common ones that you see in the card market. And so one of my favorite things with this market is you can use any one of these as a standalone strategy and be successful with it. But what I like to do, and my favorite tip here that I've got for you today, so think about every investment as an opportunity to try to stack some strategies. Now, sometimes one strategy is all you need, and that's okay. As long as the upside makes sense, you do what you want to do there. But if I have the ability to do so, I want to stack multiple strategies so I have different paths to victory, because I'm not always going to be right? Like, I might buy a card that I think is perfect for grading and I send it off and it comes back a 9. Like that's going to happen. Then what do? I might do all the research in the world, buy a player speculating on him and he goes out and he sucks. Like that happens too, right? So there are all kinds of things that can go wrong in this market. And so what do we do when things go wrong? Well, this is where having a backup plan can actually be really advantageous. And it also just raises our overall odds that we're going to be successful. So I'm going to share an example with you too. So this is from our community. It's called Ignite, but this is where we help people win with cards. But our member here had bought a Jackson Churio green Topps Chrome Auto. At the time, it was a PSA 10 Pop 1, the only PSA 10 that was available. Now, this was in late 2024. So he bought this card in September of 2024 for a little over $500. He actually got a good deal on it because he was buying this thing from Canada and it kind of went lower at a weird end time. So he actually got a good deal just kind of built into the card. This was probably a $700, $800 card even at the time, or at least it should have been. And he's picking this thing up for $500 and change. And so he's also buying this thing at the end of the calendar year when values are at their relative low points for baseball cards. And so guess what happens though? Jackson Churio goes out in the playoffs and as a 20-year-old rookie hits 2 home runs. What do you think happens to card values when that kind of thing happens in the national spotlight? There's nowhere to go but up, right? And so our member here was able to sell this card for $1,500 after that happened, sell the card way sooner than he thought he'd be able to, profit $764 for a 143% ROI after just a few weeks of owning the card. That's what I'm talking about. When you stack strategies, he was playing the seasonal market swings by buying something at a relative discount. He also just got a good deal where he really could have flipped the card instantly for a couple $100 profit. But then he also had the playoffs going in his favor. And so that gave him a third opportunity, a third path to victory. And it ended up being that one that happened first. So he took the money and he didn't need to even worry about the other ones. Guys, I hope this is helpful though. Just thinking about like, as you're making your investments, you don't always have to have 10 different paths to victory, but can you stack 2 of these? Can you stack 3 or 4 of these and give yourself at least a backup plan if the initial plan that you had in mind doesn't go your way? And by the way, this is the type of thing we talk about all the time in our membership program, Ignite. So if you're looking for more structure, more help along the way, more support, like we've got your back. I'll leave a link in the description below and you can take a look to see if it's right for you. But otherwise, I hope this video has been helpful. We will see you on the next one.